Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Rebecca Addelman, a writer and producer whose work you may have encountered on China, Illinois, New Girl, and Love. She came to TIFF in 2016 with her short film The Smoke, starring Lisa Repo Martel, and her first feature, Paper Year, starring Eve Hewson and Avon Jugia as Los Angeles newlyweds, is now playing theatrically in Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver, and available across Canada for rental and purchase on iTunes and Google Play. It's a really good little movie, and you should check it out. Rebecca picked The Graduate, Mike Nichols' barbed 1967 satire following Benjamin Braddock, a young man of means fresh out of college, as he falls into an affair in Pasadena with the older Mrs. Robinson, the wife of his father's law partner. But he's also being set up with Mrs. Robinson's daughter Elaine, which complicates things. Dustin Hoffman, Anne Bancroft, and Catherine Ross are ideal avatars for the American archetypes dissected in Charles Webb's novel, adapted and sharpened by Calder Willingham and Buck Henry, and Nichols sets the whole thing to a Simon & Garfunkel song score that seems to be mocking Ben's dissent, even as it cheers him on. Half a century later, there's still nothing else like it. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, maybe because it's one of the most perfect movies ever made.
It's a good reason.
I was rewatching it again before coming to talk to you. I was like, I think it's just pretty much perfect. Like I can't, I have almost no quibbles with anything that I'm seeing, but mainly I picked it because that the famous ending of The Graduate,
right.
You know, where he breaks up the wedding and they run away and they get on the bus and then their looks, that feeling of like sitting in the decision that they made.
Yeah.
I liked to think that was the spiritual jumping off point for my movie.
Yeah.
That they make this big decision, they get married, and now they have to live with the consequence of that decision.
Yeah. I mean, certainly when you suggested it, it connected in my mind to Paper Year. The other thing, too, is that there are two kinds of comedy these days, it seems like. There's Yes and there's Now What.
Okay.
Like when one is about crisis and one is about opportunity. As reductive as that sounds. And The Graduate is all about the series of decisions that get you to the point where you don't know what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. And Paper Year, it starts from exactly that. There's this people who are maybe not fully briefed on the thing that they're about to embark on, which is the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and it's both movies are about young people in this sort of time of transition. Mm-hmm. You know, like I think he's 21. He turns 21 in the movie. Yeah. The characters in my movie are 22. And they're kind of maybe impulsively, maybe to feed some kind of need to figure out who they are, they make these decisions. Yeah. And they don't, in neither movie do they end up going exactly as planned.
Yeah,
no.
50 years apart, like we haven't really come any further as a species. We're still
no, and idiots. I don't think we will in 50 more years either. Yeah. You know.
Actually, I should stop and roll back. What was your first experience with The Graduate? When did you see it? Like at what point in your
development? I definitely saw it in high school. I think I was 15 or 16, and I remember liking it, but feeling like I'd missed something or something didn't connect. And then when I saw it again when I was in my 20s, and I had a better understanding of Mike Nichols and of his comedy, and I had become a Nichols and May fan, and I think when I first watched it, the comedy was above me, actually. I think it was just a little too sophisticated. And every time I watch it, it gets funnier and funnier.
Yeah.
And
roughly the same experience.
To like belittle my own comedy brain as a teenager, but he really has this incredibly precise, but the scenes are really long. Mm-hmm. You know, he's letting it just live, but every movement, every blocking move is planned out with the precision of a theater director.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is. For me, it's the feeling of being trapped in the space with Benjamin.
Yeah,
that he is suffering just by existing in this world. We don't know what kind of life he had before.
No.
We only meet him when he comes home,
Yeah.
and he's so clearly uncomfortable and squirming and desperate to make it stop that all of his choices are self-destructive.
Yeah.
But in a weird, neurotic, logical sense. Everything he does makes sense because it's the wrong choice, right? Like
and we can relate.
Yeah.
Like, of course I would feel so uncomfortable trying to check into the hotel where I'm going to have sex with my dad's partner's wife.
Yeah.
A woman I knew since I was two years old. Whatever, I'm adding backstory that I've invented. But
it feels like it's right.
Yes. But he kind of breaks the movie down into I guess now I watch it as from a filmmaker's point of view.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think before I was watching it with just like a 20-year-old to a 20-year-old, and what's that feeling, what's that malaise, and then I remember watching it as a writer, and just thinking Buck Henry was a genius, and the writing and the dexterity of the comedy is so impressive. And then watching it again this week, I kept trying to assess the shots, and how
Right.
Mike Nichols pieced it together. And he basically does the movie starts with these two big, like 20-minute sort of plays. When Benjamin's dropping Mrs. Robinson off at her house, and it's this long, long sequence where he's being cornered. She's foisting herself on him. He's trying to say no. He's squirming. Like you're saying, he's desperately trying to get out of it. And it goes on and on and on. It's so uncomfortable. It's so funny. It's so weird. And then he does something similar, Mike Nichols, when they're checking into the hotel, about to have sex for the first time.
Yeah, just dragging out the moment.
It. Every little uncomfortable interaction with the hotel clerk.
Yeah. I mean, there really wasn't... now it's cringe comedy. Now we completely understand it. Instinctively, we know what that scene is going to be.
Yeah.
Also, probably because it's The Graduate, and we've all internalized
Right.
it on some level.
Right.
But I'm trying to put myself in mind of a 1967 audience. There's nothing like that. There really hadn't been, or 68, I guess it was. And there's just no precedent for it. And that's the thing that I keep coming back to when people talk about the new American cinema. They don't really ever mention The Graduate, but it's one of the first ones
from that era.
Yeah, one of the first films that really broke the moment. And it's a studio film that isn't a studio film because it was produced independently but distributed by United Artists, and it's got that sort of sense that it's a Trojan horse for the morality and for the critique of consumerism. All the ideas flying around in it are the ones that aren't on the poster.
It's so
You
true.
sell it as a comedy, a coming of age story, a neurotic comedy thing.
Right, so with a sexual bent,
Oh, of course, that's true. The leg and the poster, all of that was about how sexy it is.
Yeah.
But then you actually have to see it and live in it and spend time in it, and these are miserable, unhappy people being miserable and unhappy for our entertainment.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a thing. I mean, sex comedies at the time were, the Carry On movies.
Yeah.
They weren't sophisticated. They weren't about, the plastics line, which supposedly killed every single time. Now it's just like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. To the point where I think just a couple of weeks ago there's a movie that somebody says, is it papery, or am I actually giving this to your movie?
I'll let you know.
No, you would have already been ahead of me. Just in the last couple of weeks, I saw a film where someone throws it back and says, "You're seriously telling me to invest in plastics?"
Oh no, not my movie.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Maybe at the wedding scene, but someone has quoted it to that point where the joke is that the audience knows that telling someone to invest in plastics is a movie reference as well as weird advice.
Yeah, I mean, we have internalized that movie. The Graduate has just become part of the fabric of what it means to be, I don't know, a North American human. Yes. But what you're talking about is so true. He did something new. The reason we're still talking about it now, it seems like, it's just part of this genre, and we are all familiar with this genre, but I guess he invented it.
I think
Mike
so.
Nichols.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of it. And maybe it's not spoken about alongside all those other movies from the 60s and 70s because it is a comedy. I don't know, I find sometimes comedy gets a bit the short shrift.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly it's dismissed in award season and things like that because it's clearly not as difficult as making someone cry on cue. I don't know. Comedy's pretty complicated.
Yeah. But then The Graduate, I think, won a bunch of awards, right?
It did Best Director.
Best Director.
But not Best Picture. Which, whatever. But
yeah.
The Oscars get it wrong all the time.
Totally.
But it's weird to watch it now, or it was even weird to watch it. I think the first time I saw it, I was probably just out of high school, maybe. Mm-hmm. It would have been on VHS. It was pan and scanned. It was no way to experience it. And then I saw it in a theater myself when it came back out. Yeah, but I remember thinking that this is a film that is really small for the amount of conversation around it, for the acclaim it received. And then the second time through, it's like, oh no, wait, it's small but it's focused. And then the third time, a few years after that, was when I started to understand that I could see it from anybody's perspective, that it wasn't just Benjamin's story,
right?
And somebody else. I mean, you hear about how it was originally Nichols wanted to do it with Robert Redford, and casting Dustin Hoffman, who was too old for the role and too obviously not a wasp. But it's the way Benjamin sees himself, and that's why it works. And it's ingenious. I wish I could remember who first said that.
I heard that Mike Nichols actually didn't want Robert Redford, that someone else involved wanted Robert Redford. I don't know if this is true or not. Right? And that Mike Nichols himself said, we can't cast Robert Redford. That man has no idea what it means to get rejected by a woman.
Yeah, that actually explains a lot for the role, too.
And that this idea, you're talking about, of basically, self-hatred and of feeling out of place in the world and, you don't belong, is not something that a guy who looks like Robert Redford embodies. Maybe Robert Redford has experienced that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he's a human being.
I would assume.
I'm sure he's felt some amount of that, we all have, but he doesn't signify that to us when we look at him.
Yeah.
We think that's the guy who gets invited to the country club.
Yeah. And it is, ultimately it is a film about white privilege that doesn't know it is yet.
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone in the movie is operating at the same level of privilege, so it's just there. It's not there. It's simply the world they all move in.
But it feels like high satire.
Yeah.
Watching it where, they're the reference to Tarzana and the houses they're in and the animal prints she's wearing and the sort of lucite lamps and in the tiki room in the fancy hotel that where they go to have their tryst. Everything about it, it's he's just nailing this one kind of wealthy white person. Yeah.
It's vulgar without the characters ever understanding how vulgar it is, I suppose. Yeah. Bancroft is allowed. Mrs. Robinson gets ugly.
Yes.
Emotionally and physically too. She's sort of dressed down a bunch of times in the film. Which, again, she was 6 years older than
I know,
Hoffman?
yeah.
It's so strange, but it works because all you have to do is style her hair a certain way and dress her a certain way and you buy it. And of course she's brilliant. Yeah. So she can sell it. But it's constantly not disorienting us, but dislocating us. We are always reeling the same way Benjamin is. And it's, the choices of lenses and just the way they shoot certain scenes, the nightclub stuff, for example, is all so assaultive that I'm always on his side, even as I understand how awfully he's acting to people. He's being an absolute shit to people.
He is, yeah. But then he's kind of not being treated well either. You don't like his parents. Yeah. They feel like they're just turning him into a fool, parading him around and trotting him out, and you sort of feel for him. I remember watching it not long ago and feeling like, I guess it's in that third act or towards the end of the movie, you start to feel like, oh, Benjamin's actually a little crazy. What he's doing is not romantic. Where he's chasing Catherine Ross and stalking her essentially and watching her get on the bus. And they've been on one date.
Yeah. No, the love story is the thing that I've never... It's not that I don't believe it. I believe that it's happening because the characters are all behaving in ways that make sense emotionally for themselves, if not each other. But I've never fully understood why she's willing to let him pull her away, unless, of course, the whole point is that she's just as broken and confused as he is, and we just never see it because she's always hiding it.
I think so, and I think that character was maybe a little underdeveloped, and maybe she wasn't as strong of an actor as Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft, so you're kind of not... That's stiff competition to be up against.
It's like a reverse Baxter, right? Like, she has to be there to be grabbed instead of abandoned.
Yeah.
But we also can't get that close to her because the real focus of this story is on Benjamin and Mrs. Robinson.
And I think she's a symbol, like, actually, to Benjamin. I don't think he views her as a real person. So I actually don't even look at that movie as a romance anymore. I don't think it's real love. I don't think she feels real love for him. I don't think Benjamin feels real love for her. I think she represents... He's embodied her with a lot of hope and a lot of things that he wants her to be. And I guess she decides to be okay with that, at least temporarily. Yeah. At least if it saves her from having to live a life that she was being, somewhat forced into. This waspy perfection thing that her parents wanted for her.
Yeah. I mean, it's ultimately it's unattainable for either of them. I don't think either of them is going to be happy. Together, they might not be happy for long, but they might also be able to work something out that helps them. And again, I come back to Paper Year, and I don't want to spoil the film for people who haven't seen it yet, but the idea of the thing that you will someday look back on as something that was really important, but while you're in it, all you can see is the chaos.
Yes. Yeah. The forest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the trees. You can't see the forest.
The forest is where you figure out you are, I guess. Yeah. Which is
you don't have the bigger picture on it. Yeah, talking about it now, I'm thinking at the end of The Graduate, I don't think Mike Nichols... Who knows what I'm trying to assume I know what Mike Nichols thinks, but I don't think he wants us. I don't think we should want those two to like Benjamin and Elaine to go get married, to run out of that wedding and then run off and get married and therefore be quote unquote happily ever after.
Right. No, I don't think that's an option for them. I mean,
and I think the happily ever after is a fiction that actually that movie is sort of subtly pointing out to us that it's going to break down at some point. So let's be more progressive. Let's be more incendiary. Let's not kind of go with the status quo. Like I think about Mike Nichols as kind of like a Hungarian Jewish. I think he was Hungarian, immigrant.
I believe so.
He
escaped the Nazis.
Escaped the Holocaust.
Came to America, couldn't speak English. The story is absolutely fascinating that he became a satirist of that specificity, that he developed the language. I mean, Billy Wilder, I guess, did the same thing. Really.
Oh, did he? That
just in
makes
terms
sense.
of the origins and
But he gave them this out. They were so in, like Mike Nichols was so in that New York scene, but he was always an outsider. It gives him that perspective.
Yeah.
And
then to move to Los Angeles and fix that perspective on the society that was ostensibly going to pay him very well for the rest of his life. I mean, he really is making a movie about producers.
Yeah.
And how single-minded is the wrong term, but just monomaniacal. Every single person has a complete plan for everybody else around them. Mrs. Robinson knows exactly what she's going to do with Benjamin, which is why it triggers her so badly when he stops first. But Elaine has a path that she's not going to follow, I guess. She's
a little bit more of the mystery. Yeah. She's a bit foggy.
She is. I mean, as you say, it's probably necessary that she's underdeveloped.
Yeah.
It's also, I don't know, I guess it's probably the way movies saw women in the 60s as well. The other film example I keep thinking of is The Heartbreak Kid, is Elaine May's film.
Oh, yeah, which I haven't seen.
It's really hard to find.
Yeah. And I've been trying to find her movie, A New Leaf. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah,
I can't find it anywhere.
Oh, it's available on Blu-ray. It's just come out. Yeah, it's great. It's great. And so is The Heartbreak Kid. The Heartbreak Kid also has a character who is sidelined immediately. Basically, Jeannie Berlin's character is the awful wife of Charles Grodin, who is developed only as a comic engine. Sort of the reverse of Catherine Ross. But she is attained immediately. He marries her right away and immediately comes to regret it, is attracted to Sybil Shepherd, who he meets on their honeymoon.
Ah, okay. It's
just it is basically May's answer film to The Graduate without ever coming right out and acknowledging it, but Grodin's character is a middle-class New York Jew, and so is Berlin, where she's from a better family, I think it's implied, than he is. And then it's just the reverse temptation. And I've always wondered what May and Nichols would talk about after that came out, or during even, because he must have been aware of it.
Sure, yeah.
It's so elegantly disembowels The Graduate, because it's not about surfaces, it's all about the ugliness of it.
Yeah,
and status. There's this whole sequence, well, you'll see it eventually.
I'll have to watch it.
But it's all about the things that The Graduate refuses to discuss because the characters are too privileged.
Right.
And it's this really fascinating collision of
I gotta
perspectives.
see it.
Yeah, you do.
Because, The Graduate danced this line of, I suppose, satirizing that group of people, but still embracing them.
Well, it likes them. Yeah, it likes the
them.
lifestyle.
It likes,
Although it's
not
repulsed by it at the same time.
It's not really, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think if you lived that lifestyle and you watch that movie, you can like that movie.
Sure.
You aren't going to feel repelled by it.
Yeah, I mean, morally, it gives you the out.
Yeah.
It breaks up the adulterous relationship and the weird age difference, and our hero is rewarded for making that choice by winning the nice young lady. And they go off happily ever after. I mean, if you really insist on seeing it that way, you can.
Yeah.
Which, ugh,
yeah, it's really,
not how I see it.
No. Creepy. Here's a fun fact I heard about The Graduate.
Please.
Not fact-checked. I haven't even punched it into the internet.
Okay.
So, please, I want someone to do that. But a very smart writer I was working with on a show recently, he told me that, Paul Simon hired to do the soundtrack,
right?
Wrote all these new songs, came in to play a bunch of them for Mike Nichols. Mike Nichols heard some and said, I hate them. I hate it. This one in particular, I hate it. And Paul Simon went, oh shit, okay. And this is how the story was told to me, that he stepped out of the room, and I guess he was with Art Garfunkel. They were like, well, let's just play him this other one that we have. They had another one written, not for the movie, and they came in and played it, and it was Mrs. Robinson, but they had originally written it as Mrs. Roosevelt.
Oh, yes, I think I've heard about the title change.
And the title, and they were just like, let's just sing Robinson instead of Roosevelt. And if you slot in the word Roosevelt when you listen to that song now instead of Robinson, the song finally makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot more sense. I'm doing it right now.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
yeah, I can see that. And yet it's iconic in the other direction.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense, but
that's what's great about it.
It's in the film, yeah.
It's in the film, and it's just because of the context of the film, you're like, oh, this makes perfect sense. But it's, and I love hearing about moments like that in film history, any kind of art history, that are almost accidental. Yeah. Or it's because of a failure that they got to such a success.
Well, it's the shark in Jaws, right?
Yeah.
If it had worked, that film would be probably still pretty good, but it wouldn't be memorable.
No.
It wouldn't be what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
So, and I also heard that Mike Nichols just kept the camera rolling for that final shot of the two of them on the bus.
Yeah.
And I guess the script had it ending in a happier place.
But you need that, yeah.
You need
the space. You need the space to watch them think, which is something that so few movies now are even willing to do. Just to live in that moment of uncertainty and discomfort at the end of a film. We have this what is it? The Steven Soderbergh perfect cut to black, which he can do every single time. Yeah. But not everyone else can, although they all try to emulate it, where you just snap into blackness and wait 90 seconds to roll your credits, and it's like, okay, not
right.
Not
they didn't quite work.
Yeah. But the space to think with the image is something that I find far more disturbing. It's the freeze frame at the end of the 400 blows. It's the sense that, oh no, the story isn't over. We're just leaving. These characters are going to continue.
The power of what cinema can do. So I saw a movie recently that played with that idea, and I'd never seen this before. And it was the new Claire Denis movie,
which I haven't seen. Let the Sunshine
In, and with Juliette Binoche. And the ending, and I don't think this ruins anything, it's just more of a filmmaking choice, is that during the last scene, the characters are still talking. It's Juliette Binoche and Gerard Depardieu, and she just starts rolling the credits over them.
Over the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So suddenly, the name Juliette Binoche pops up, and then all the other actors get their cards that pop up.
Really?
And the amazing thing is that it made the scene better.
Okay.
Yeah. The scene was good and it had been going on for a while. And then I think one of them has a sort of line that is sort of a line that somewhat synthesizes the idea of the movie, and then suddenly these names pop up, but the scene's still going on.
Yeah. There's got to be an Altman film where it kind of happens.
Someone
where
has done something
like
that.
a slow pull out, but it's clearly
Right.
over. It's
clearly
telling you the movie has ended, but this just pops right up.
starts up. Yeah.
Wow.
And that was the first signifier that, oh yeah, we're at the very end.
Good for her. That's such a weird
She's still
choice.
doing new things. Yeah.
I interviewed her when she came through here for Bastards a few years ago at TIFF,
cool.
and it was just, it was marvelous. I don't know if you've seen Bastards, but it's incredibly brutal. It's one of her meanest, basically, one of the Dark Soul of Europe kind of films. And when I heard she was making a movie with Binoche, and it wasn't going to be a drama per se.
No, it's really a comedy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to catch up to it.
It's very interesting. It's like I've never quite... It's interesting to see like the rom-com put through that filter. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, right. It can be done in all these weird ways.
Yeah. I remember when she released Trouble Every Day, which is the horror film.
Yeah.
The full-on biological vampire thing. It's like, yep, you can do that too.
She's fascinating. Yeah, because there's not like the one thing that she does.
Yeah. I often wonder how... Yeah, since the... this is me leaping topics, but I think it'll work. Yeah. Since The Graduate was considered almost European at the time, because it was coming out of the French, or rather cinema was coming out of the French New Wave, and that supposedly influenced the American cinema that was happening. I've often wondered how infrequently that plot... I'm surprised more people aren't remaking it or reworking it in the same way. It's just...
Like the way we have remakes?
Exactly.
You mean like actually remake The Graduate?
Yeah, I'm surprised that Europe didn't try to redigest it and do it there. Because you would think it's you could transpose it to Paris, you could transpose it to Monte Carlo.
You could.
I'm
not sure if this relates, but so I've been living in America for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And there's something I find unique to that country that at least Canada doesn't have. And I don't think Europe has this in the same degree at all. And it is this sort of desire for cookie cutter sameness and status. And by that, a lot of that is pinned on where you went to school.
Oh, yeah.
And what your college education says a lot about you. One of the first questions you'll get asked by almost any American.
Really?
At least in sort of my line of work, like as a TV writer and when you're out going on meetings, meeting people, it's where'd you go to school? Because the answer tells everyone, it's this big signifier of like, you're that kind of person. You grew up in that kind of household with that much money, and your parents are probably this way, and you were set off on this course in life at a young age.
Okay.
And I think that The Graduate is talking about that too.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know?
It absolutely is.
And
who your family is, who
your family is, and what you're expected to be and do as a result of this place you were born in. And Benji's supposed to be just like his parents, probably went to the same school as them. He probably just followed the path.
Oh yeah, he's a legacy.
He's
question.
a legacy.
His entire life is a legacy.
The blazer he's wearing is probably his dad's blazer. Like everything is being done. He's doing it all correctly up until this point in his life. He hits a crisis. And when you brought up Europe, I was like, I just wonder if they even know if that's the same idea.
Yeah. England absolutely has
England has it. The Oxford Cambridge thing, yes. Yeah. And they have a major class system there that is
so much of it.
Even worse.
And
my American therapist lived in England, and she's like, oh, it's terrible over there. they think it's all, they think that They look down upon us Yankees. Anyway, we can cut that part out too.
No, it's fine. It's totally valid. But and the thing about England too is that the same thing that has ingrained itself there for centuries, which is that if you're working class, you don't aspire to leave it. Mm-hmm. You're proud of it to a fault. That's creeping over to the States now, which is
Thomas the Tank Engine. I have a stepson. Anyway, and my partner will talk about it. Like he loved Thomas the Tank Engine.
Okay.
But his dad, my partner, doesn't really like Thomas the Tank Engine because he says it's all about the worker.
It absolutely is.
Knowing their place.
Yep.
And that anytime that train starts to do things that the train's not, that is not within his class, he gets a talking down.
Yeah, I remember
dressing down.
I got so much angry mail, literal physical mail, because this is the late 80s.
Yeah.
But when I was writing for the Stars video magazine here, they gave me a Thomas Tank Engine tape to review.
Yeah.
And I just, in a little 100-word capsule, I just pointed out that this is actually not the best lesson for kids, because one of the episodes they gave me had one of the trains, it wasn't Thomas, it was somebody else, didn't want to work, so they walled him up in a tunnel until he learned his lesson. And I thought, don't do that.
This is terrible.
This is not for children.
No.
But yeah, now that you mention it, that is so precisely English.
Yes, and I think that's what that whole series is about.
Subtly telling them to know.
Yeah, and to take pride in the work you do, but don't aspire to other kinds of work.
Right. Oh, that's disturbing.
It is.
And where Benjamin is basically being groomed to be a captain of industry, although we never do find out what the industry is or where he will go.
No, which is part of what's so kind of brilliant too, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Do they have enough money that he never really has to work? Is he just going to invest in plastics and let it roll? Is that what we're seeing? Or is it simply that he is so uninterested in that line, in whatever his future is, that we literally can't see it? It's not visible to us.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Because it doesn't make sense, but it does within the film. That's the thing that I'm so stunned by Nichols' accomplishment. Having made Virginia Woolf, which is a realist grotesquerie, right? I mean, it's black and white, but it's in your face. You're seeing things as they are. He made this gorgeous, surrealist thing that doesn't let you see beyond its frame. Like, it will not. It shows you the things that it wants to show you and nothing more.
No, and each frame is kind of perfectly constructed.
Because that's his world. That's Benjamin's world, right?
That's
like, there are no poor people.
That's his world.
He has people for everything. Everything is there for him. When he goes to the strip club, it is grotesque, right? Because it's not his place.
Yeah.
He's ventured outside. And
and he acts like a bore.
Yeah.
You know,
he's just trying to give this poor woman the worst experience of her life.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they run off together, and she may have the worst
that's their
experience
only date. That's why it's so dark, you know, and to brand it a romance or anything about this, you know, being like showing us what love is.
Yeah. It's not.
It's not. It's the exact opposite, you know, but that's what I think is so relatable. I mean, to these because despite the fact that it's philosophical, The Graduate, too, and it's about ideas, I think it's also, there's this relatable human thing, which is we're like looking for answers everywhere but in ourselves, and hoping that something else saves us.
I think I just realized that they've been remaking it all along. It's from the woman's perspective, that's what the modern romantic comedy is. That it's
right, like,
someone
is he going to swoop in and save me?
And falls for somebody weird, and
right, yeah.
They're all about Elaine.
Yeah, and we've taken it though, and we've said that all Elaine really wants is to find the right man.
Yeah, which is it's what am I trying to think of? It's he's a rebel and will never ever be any good. It's a pop song. It's the illusion of the one guy whose rough edges are
the
just
bad boy.
Yeah, but they're only there because no one understands him like I do.
Exactly, and he's gonna get me. It's Grease, you know.
Yeah, it is Grease. Except
like,
in Grease, she changes herself for him.
Yeah,
which is something that, it sits less well every year, doesn't it? Like, there are new generations of people seeing Grease and going, "Ooh,
that one never jived with me." Also, I think something about, I don't know, growing up like a sort of Jewish girl. That movie is so white.
Yeah.
You know, it's so like this perfect Americana thing. I'm like, and I guess, listen, there's a big argument that Jews are white. The jury's out on my end.
That's a much longer conversation, and I think we need to see where the Trump administration goes next year before we can really.
God.
Sorry.
Can't leave anything in their hands. Yeah.
No, I didn't even want to bring it up. But yeah, same here. My family was trying to get me to watch Fiddler on the Roof, and I'm like, I first of all, I can't relate to it. Secondly, it's 3 hours long.
Yeah.
The songs are fine, but come on. I was 11 when Grease came out, so it was much more of my generational
it's in
thing.
that, no, sure. But every kid saw it. Every kid loved it.
Oh, yeah. But oof. Yeah, no. It's, I mean, you want to talk about 30-year-olds playing teenagers. That's a very disturbing film.
Yeah.
But as a result, I was, I wasn't even born when The Graduate came out.
Right.
And it seems to have endured considerably better than the other Hollywood fantasies about adolescent rebellion. I mean, there are so many of them, and Grease isn't necessarily one, but it's the one that keeps coming back. Like, it never really goes away. It fell out of fashion a little bit when it was only available on VHS in that crappy version, but then once it got reissued and remastered and Nichols' star started to rise again after that fallow period in the 80s, it all seemed to, it clicked then, and that was 25 years ago, and it's never really been gone.
Yeah.
And Criterion just put it out this year, finally on Blu-ray.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
And in fact, when you were saying that, who can know what Nichols was thinking, you really need to listen. Well, there's a commentary track with him and Soderbergh that's great. Cool. That was recorded in 2007 for, I think, the MGM Blu-ray for the 40th anniversary. And it's just, it doesn't unpack the film necessarily, but it talks about creative choices and the direction in a really interesting way. But it is this thing that is impenetrable on purpose, right? I mean, you can't fully understand why people do what they do. You can't fully understand anything beyond the movie. It's a time capsule of itself.
Well, that's what I was about to say, in that things also are emblematic of the time they're made in.
Yeah. And
I want to give the filmmaker as much credit as I can, but sometimes the filmmaker is just, they're making all these choices and they have the vision, but a film takes on a life of its own. And it becomes, we invest it with all of this other meaning. Not to say it was never there, but whether Mike Nichols knew that in 50 years it would the lifestyle he was showing us and that community and those kinds of people, if we would still be viewing it that way. I mean, probably not. He probably didn't know that. How could he?
No, yeah. Well, I mean, even the characters probably didn't know.
No.
About the future. I'm trying to figure out how to process it now, and it's like, well, they're Democrats in '67, but they'd be Republicans now.
Yes.
Like that
Those
world
are Republicans.
has completely moved over.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the characters know it. I don't know they know where they're going. They just, it's, that's what I meant about not knowing what Benjamin does. He's just capitalism. That's just that world. And I sound like the scruffy alt-weekly writer that I am, I suppose, by saying they're not like me, but there's more of them in me than I would like to admit, because they also want to be successful and comfortable, and everybody wants that. That's not only what we've been taught to want by movies, among other things, but it's kind of what human beings want, comfort and not needing to worry about everything.
And prosperity.
Yeah. And the idea that everything will be taken care of for you is frightening and comforting in equal measure, I think, because Benjamin, all he has to do is not resist and everything's fine. But then it's a body snatchers movie.
Yeah,
right? It's not a romance, it's not a comedy. All of his choices are designed to make him an individual, which brings him nothing but pain, which is why it's funny.
Yeah, and cynical. When you say Benji, it is capitalism. You don't need to know the industry. That made me think, well, yeah, and capitalism is America.
Yeah. More now than
America, at the end of the day, it's all about the dollar. And now I'm looking at this movie from a political bent. Oh my God, it's really opening it up.
But the good ones have that, right? Like everything is in there. It's rich enough.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the obvious, the closing question of the podcast, which is, what, if anything, of The Graduate have you borrowed or lifted or quoted or just outright stolen into your own creative DNA? I mean, we talked about Paper Year being inspired by it.
Yeah. I think it's this feeling, and realizing it as I'm talking with you for the past little bit, it's this feeling of giving your protagonist that outsider lens. Like, they're trying to fit in. Maybe they're trying to put on the trappings of the fantasy of life as we think it should be lived. But your inner soul is drowning.
Yeah.
and doesn't quite know how to fit in and abide by the rules.
Yeah. Or that, I mean, what I got from Paper Year was the sense that the characters believe that the rules don't apply to them, that they are...
At first.
Yeah, as you always feel whenever you start a new relationship, this is great, this is special, no one else on earth has ever felt like this, that's the rush of love. Yeah. But one of the first scenes is the characters defining themselves as, well, we just wanted to do this. This was important to us. And not consciously saying that we don't care about anybody else, but that's the message, that everyone else is receiving it in that way.
Yeah.
When my wife and I decided we wanted a small wedding, we did the City Hall wedding, as a matter of fact. We've been together for a couple of years, but it was not without considerable convulsion in my family, because it was really just parents, grandparents, and a few friends, and we, what the room would hold, and we didn't want to do a great big wedding, and we had our reasons, and 14 years later, I think we were correct. But I mean, it's a middle finger to literally everyone who isn't there, whether you want it to be or not. And it took us a while for us to realize that, or it took a while for it to sink in. Yeah,
even though it's your marriage, when marriage is the kind of thing that everyone's got an opinion on.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to weigh in on, and especially people in your family. And I think you're absolutely right. In the movie, they are trying to be rebellious, but I think ironically they're being rebellious by doing something, getting married, that is completely traditional.
Yeah, it's the least rebellious thing you can do.
You know? They're sort of trying to pursue some kind of, they would never say this, but some kind of traditional path of like, boy and girl fall in love, boy and girl stay in love forever.
Mm-hmm.
And they aren't prepared for it. They're not geared that way. And I guess my feeling is that most of us aren't. Not to say that most of us shouldn't be married or that marriages can't work. It's just this idea of chasing the fiction.
Yeah, well, and they're young enough that they don't even know who they are.
Exactly.
So you can't. Exactly. I mean, that's the thrust of the film.
That's
obviously,
the thrust of them. Yeah.
But also life.
Yeah.
When I was 21, 22, I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody really does. And if they do, they're in for a lot of disappointment, which brings us back to The Graduate.
Yeah.
I think Benjamin does know who he is, but no one else wants to hear it.
I don't even think he wants to hear it.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know? Like, he's sort of a depressed person.
Yeah, and there hadn't really been a lot of that in movies at 67 either, which is something else that struck me the last time I watched it. It's like, there's no one's taking antidepressants. They're all drinking.
No, they're all drinking. There's
no sense of that the ennui that the film is engaging with could be, if not treated or understood. Yeah, if not treated, then at least understood. Yeah. And they don't want to hear it, because being sick or being unwell is a weakness. It's not done.
I wish it was different now, but I think people still don't want to hear it.
There's still a stigma.
Yeah, and we still drink away our problems, or we think we do.
Yeah, now we have craft beer.
No, yes, everything.
There's a whole industry for that.
And like all these weird, like I'm a mom now, so I notice it, but so much advertising and branding for moms to drink wine.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Yeah. There's like, I saw this, I was camping with my family, and in the camp store, like on the campground, there was an oven mitt with like a 50s housewife on it, and it said like, wine is my favorite salad. I was like, what is this? So it was such a strange, and like, mommy time is wine time, and like, it's just this.
Well, the book club joke now, right? Like that women in their 40s have book clubs where they're just an excuse to drink.
I've seen
it turn up in at least 3 movies this year already, and there's a movie called Book Club, which is not. I haven't seen that, but I'm assuming that's part of it.
I'm sure they're drinking wine in that movie.
Yeah, but you're right. It's a new branding locked into self-medication as the solution, but
which they're also doing in Paper Year.
Yeah, but again, they don't know it.
They don't know it.
They're not aware of it.
No,
the movie does. Something that I really admire in films is that they will show us a character, and I think we just talked about this last week in the Suki and Lee episode about Ali Fear Eats the Soul. They will show you a character making a bad decision and allow that to happen while still letting the viewer understand that the film doesn't endorse or approve. That you can watch without, the music will tell you, the camera angles will tell you. There are things that happen in Paper Year which are absolutely wrong, but they have to happen. And we have to endure it with the character to get to the other side. But it's something that doesn't quite happen in The Graduate because everyone is wrong. There's no moral judgment, but then it snaps back to a base morality where the young couple gets away, maybe.
Well, and to compare it, I mean, Benji, like you said, he's the one that ends it with Mrs. Robinson. He's the one that kind of manages to pull himself out before things get really bad.
Right.
In Paper Year, Eve's character, Franny, she makes a bad decision, and we do live with her as she lives through it, but it happens to her. She has to feel and suffer the consequences of the bad decision. And it's, I think, unpleasant, you know?
No, it absolutely
is. Because those moments are unpleasant.
Yeah. But
Benji somehow, Mrs. Robinson, a movie from her perspective would be fascinating.
Yeah. It's the other thing that surprises me about The Graduate is that John Cassavetes is across town making faces.
Yeah.
That, he is putting Jenna Rollins through that same stuff.
She's going through it.
And we're in it with her. We're living with that side of it. And it is such a different...
Yeah. In a way, he made that's much more honest. Yeah.
Well, it's not stylized, right? It doesn't give us that exit. But the pain just comes through unfiltered that way. The Graduate, at least, you get some mellow Simon and Garfunkel to ease you through it.
Yeah. Yeah, and he kind of takes you out of the scene just before it gets too miserable for anyone.
Mm-hmm. But then you're stranded with them on the bus.
You're stranded.
You got out, or did you?
Or did you? More and more. I mean, the ending always landed on me where I go, oh, maybe they're not that happy. But now I'm like, well, they were never happy. These are two depressed people.
Yeah.
Elaine grew up in that house with those parents. Mm-hmm. With two drunk parents. Yeah. Basically, two alcoholics who don't like each other. If you really have to break it down, what is that like?
Yeah.
But the movie isn't getting into that stuff. The movie it is stylized, like you say. There's a refinement and a kind of distancing lens that makes it art and not as much just, bam, here are like humans in front of you.
Yeah. That'd be the European version.
Yeah, yeah. Which is what Cassavetes was getting closer to.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah.
There's got to be a happy ending for somebody.
I think, just getting to know yourself. I mean, when we were talking about when you were 22, you maybe knew what you wanted, but you didn't know yourself. Which is absolutely correct for me as well. I now think I might know what I want, but I'm never sure that I'm right.
That's actually a pretty good place to be, though, isn't it?
Because I think as soon as I start to be sure that I'm doing something correctly, that I'm really, the way I was sure I had to get married, these ideas of like, I've got it all figured out, I'm good. I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, no, that's nowhere to be.
That's nowhere to be.
Yeah, I'm trying really hard to be content.
Yeah,
and the fact that I'm trying is probably the good thing.
That's all you got to do. Yeah. You'll wind up being content some of the time.
My thanks to Rebecca Addelman, whose debut feature Paper Year is now playing theatrically in Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver, and available for rental and sale on iTunes and Google Play everywhere in Canada. It'll be out in the US later this summer. You can keep an eye on its release pattern on Twitter at Paper Year Movie, all one word, and you can find The Graduate on Blu-ray and DVD in that excellent Criterion edition I mentioned. It's also available on iTunes and streaming on Filmstruck in the US. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you want to leave a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, it would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.
You're just too darn loud.